What's up, guys? This is Jorge from Jorge's PSD, and today I'm going to be showing you how I do my player treatment. I know this is probably the most elusive part of design, and I think it's kind of difficult to figure out how someone does their player treatment unless they actually explain it to you. So I've been asked, by DMs for a while on actually how to do this and if I was going to make a video on it. And I finally had the time, so I finally figured that now was a good time to actually show you how I go about my player treatment. So we're in Photoshop right now, and I'm looking at it. We got a gradient background, and then we have our cutout of Justin Jefferson. So just looking at this and kind of what I do when I first start is I kind of figure out, okay, how do I match the jersey of the player, the skin of the player, with that background? How do I get it to feel like he is in this environment? So one of the things about lighting is I'll look at this and I'll say, okay, well, this darker part of the screen, this like darker navy, purplish, that should be what the shadows end up being by the end of the treatment. And then kind of same thing with the pink. Okay, well, if you have a pink light shining on someone's skin, it's going to have a pink tinge to it. So just off that initial look, that's kind of what I think about before I even start treating the player. A player that looks like this, completely untreated, to something that looks more similar to this. So you'd be surprised how actually easy this is. It does take a little bit of time to get the hang of, depending on the player and depending on the environment you want to put that player in. But you'd be surprised how easy this actually is. So first things first, we'll start by going into the Camera Raw. So Camera Raw is really the bread and butter of player treatment. I think that 80% of player treatment is done in Camera Raw, at least in my experience. So we have here this before and after. And obviously we have a lot of settings here. It can be, a lot to take in all at once, but I'll break down for you kind of the most important bits of it. And I think it'll shed some light on how I go about my process of doing this. So obviously we first start out with light. So looking at the original photo, I did notice that it was a little bit brighter on this side. This purple was kind of really almost washed out. So I didn't really want that. I really wanted the jersey to have that deep, rich purple color. So that was kind of the point of my starting point for player treatment, right? So to do that, to bring out the, we'll go here. We'll take out the color grading and the color mixer. So the point of this was to lower down the brightness of the jersey, obviously darken it with the exposure. I wanted to bump up contrast. Wanted to bring out the highlights. And I think the most important part about this lighting section is what you do with shadows. I think shadows is a really important part of how I style my graphics. The point of it really is when you have it all the way low here, you lose a lot of the details in the jerseys. Now for me, I like to get all the wrinkles and all that stuff like into my my graphic. I think that's important because it helps you know actually where the light is hitting off of the player. So for the shadows, for example, I'll bring it all the way up, bring it to 66. That's what I hear. It's just an arbitrary number. It's not, tried and true, which is what I thought looked good for this. I can just type it in. It might be easier. 66. And so here you can see the striations in the jersey, for lack of a better term. I don't really know what you call the wrinkles. Yeah, we'll call them the wrinkles. So you can see the wrinkles in the jersey pretty clearly here. There's a little bit of some, color mixing issues here, but we can handle that in a little bit. I think one of the easiest ways to do that is to go to detail, color noise reduction, and it goes through and fixes that. There you go. So nice. So yeah, so for light, I know if I can get this thing out here. Yeah. So for the light, the goal was two things. One, to lower the exposure on the photo because it was a little bit too bright. And then the second part was the shadows, bringing out the details and the wrinkles of the jersey. I just think it looks better like that. That's my personal preference, right? So then we'll go to color. Now, because the background that we were using in this graphic was this purplish, pinkish gradient, it was kind of important to make sure that if we were messing with anything, it would have been this slider here. So obviously the more you go to the right, the more purple it gets. The more you go to the left, the more green, yellowish it gets. So it obviously started at 0. Here you can kind of see there's no purple in the skin. There's no like tinge to it anywhere. So bringing that up to 15 kind of helped. Let me do that. I'm toggling back and forth, and you can sort of subtly tell in the skin that it's lightening it up a little bit, right? So that's what we did there. And then obviously wanting to get that deep, rich purple color, you do that with vibrance. So for me, if we start this at 0, I wanted to bump that up until the jersey got into a good spot. So it's plus 30 here. Now, bump up the sharpening as far as, these effects go. Texture, clarity, always kind of put them in that 30 and 20 range. Here, I try not to overdo it because a lot of people do, and I'm not a big fan of that. This curves, I rarely touch it, and to be honest with you, I really don't even know what it does. I kind of just will mess around with it, and if I like how it looks, I'll keep it. If I don't, I don't. And just kind of trial and error. I kind of actually want to bump it up a little bit more. But it's all kind of a feel thing. It's not a science, and I think people have their, some people want it to be really structured. A lot of times it's not, and it kind of just depends on how you're feeling, what you want out of the design. But I do think that the secret sauce of player treatment has to do with color mixer. It's kind of Camera Raw's own built-in selective color. And for me, this is how you get a lot of those colors that you want out of the player's skin and the jersey. You get that through color mixer. So this is without it, this is with it. It's very subtle, as are a lot of these things if you look at them independently. But I have noticed that color mixer ends up being where I spend the most time when I'm in Camera Raw. So obviously the oranges and reds are where you most times are connected to the skin of the player. So, if I move the orange, all the way up and down, it changes the skin of the player pretty dramatically. So a lot of that stuff, you try to be really subtle. Like I said, when I'm thinking about this environment that we have here, you want to kind of bring out this purples, want to bring out this pinks, stuff like that. So here are my settings for it. It's not an exact science. You guys can take a look at this. I will have the PSD available, so you can toggle with this and see what you like and what you don't like about it. But a lot of the time is spent trying to get this jersey to match the colors of the environment, right? So this is kind of the color grading, bump up the sharpness a little bit, but this is essentially what my Camera Raw looks like going into my graphics. So we'll take out these extra layers. I mean, you can just see off of that alone how much Camera Raw helps get the player to look like they're in the environment. I mean, that is 80% of the work right there. So if you're, looking to take one skill from this, let it be that Camera Raw is kind of the GOAT when it comes to player treatment. If you can get familiar and get comfortable with that, your, treatment will be that much better. But then there's a few extra steps to get it to where we want to go, and that has to do with gradient maps. And I don't think a lot of people talk about gradient maps. I don't, remember watching a video on it particularly. I think I just, was messing with it one day and found out that it was a really great way to bring out certain colors in the jersey. So for these gradients, I use the same gradient that I used to make this background. And so I have these colors all in here. But the goal of this is to make sure that you're bringing out the colors from the background and try to pull them out in the jersey. So for example, we have this color here. If I can get the eyedrop tool. Right, so this kind of pinkish magenta, and as you go across the jersey, it that color exists on that back gradient, right? So, and I can even show you that. So we have this gradient, we'll toss it here. So this color is from one of the parts of our jersey here. But if I can find it, it kind of fits around this part of our gradient. So the goal of this, like I said, is to try to pull colors from this background and get it into the jersey, right? So we have this gradient map. We have it for the jersey. It's on color blend mode at 63%. Like I said, not a science, so you can go lower or higher based off your preference. But generally, I like to stay within like the 50, 60, 70 range for this. Try not to overdo it because then it kind of just looks fake. But this is one of the methods that I use to kind of get the players to feel like they're in that background setting, right? And it's really not anything crazy. You kind of just slap a gradient on there, you put it on, and what I do is initially it's something that covers the entirety of the player, but then you'll put a layer mask on it, and you kind of just paint in the color of the jersey. So if I were to delete it and then put it here, I'll invert it. Basically what I did was I took my brush tool, let's bump it up here, and painted in that jersey. And I'm a little bit more careful. I'm doing it really quickly here, but whenever I do it in my own time, I do make sure to go slow, because I don't really want, you can see here, if you're not careful, when you're brushing stuff in, it can really tint the skin of the player, which ends up looking funky. So, it does take a little bit of time. It does take a little bit of detail to be able to figure that out, but that's kind of where gradient maps come into play. So if I backspace here, you can see there's actually two gradient maps. There's one that affects the jersey and then one that affects the skin. So they're essentially the same mask. So how I made the skin gradient map, I'll delete it here, was I duplicated this, clipped it, I inverted the mask, and then now we can see it only affects really the skin. And then I dropped it down to, I believe, 18. And so there you basically have like a less strong, I think the word for that is actually weaker. So a weaker gradient mask for the skin. And so it's very light, very subtle, but it does make the player feel like they're actually in that environment. And I can zoom out here. You can see as I toggle it on and off. So yeah, I mean, these two things make a world of the difference when it comes to player treatment. So, and that was something that I found out a year or two ago, and I've been using it in all my other graphics. So between our camera raw, let me toggle that off, between camera raw, turn that on, to our jersey gradient map, to our skin gradient map, you can already see how much just a few steps of player treatment can actually totally change your cutout and make it feel like it's part of the environment, right? So the last bit of it is this lighting and shadows bit. And so I actually learned this from a designer who makes a lot of tutorial videos, Reese Knight. I think it's Knight X Design on Instagram, on YouTube. I watched a lot of his videos, I think a couple years ago, and I recommend it to anybody who's looking to kind of figure out lighting. He has a bunch of videos on it, but I'll stop yapping. Basically what the style was is he would put the blend mode of the lighting layer on overlay. He would put the brush strength to 20%, and then he would just paint the lighter parts of the jersey. So, as and then it should be white. But as a designer, I think it's always a good thing to expose yourself to how other designers do stuff. So this is just kind of how I do it. I basically try to figure out where the light would be hitting the player. So obviously it's like a vertical light, and it generally comes down. So the places that would be affected the most are, let me see if I can do, so it would be these areas on the legs, this area here on the front part of the jersey, and then the top part of the helmet. So those are the biggest parts that are affected by light. So whenever I'm going through and doing my lighting, I'll kind of make sure to put an extra emphasis on those areas where I know that if the player was actually in this scene, accentuating where the light is already hitting his jersey, and to make sure that if there's any other places where the light would be hitting, and making sure to highlight that as well. So this is just me painting it in. It's not a science, like I said. It's just kind of, wherever you think the light would be hitting, that's where I would recommend putting your soft brush. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty strong right now, and this would be something that I would go through, and this normally takes me about an hour to do all the way through. I'm just kind of showing you the brief, abridged version of how that works. But, you know, there's a lot more detail that goes into this. So, for example, like that'll be the outer glow, but then I'll get really nifty and go in here and try to make sure I'm getting, like I said, the striations on the jersey. You know, if the player was in the environment, the light would especially hit these parts of the jersey. So I try to make sure to get these. And so, yeah, I mean, you'll go through this whole process, and, you know, you'll put on some good music and you know, you kind of get in the zone. And that's kind of what I generally tend to do, because this does take a little bit. It is the most fun because, you know, you always get to toggle back and forth. You'd be like, oh, like that's pretty cool. So the similar process is true with shadows. So instead of a white brush, you're using a black brush, same opacity, bring it to overlay. And then you'll paint in, whereas, you know, the light stuff you were painting in all the parts that the light was hitting, this will be the part where you're making sure where the light doesn't hit, you paint in. So it makes it a little bit more dramatic. So, for example, in the space in between the side of the helmet and the shoulder pad, no matter where the light is, it's pretty difficult for it to hit there. So you'll want to dim that a little bit, right? And then, you know, the natural shadow of the photo follows this line here. So I'm gently painting that in. And then you'll also notice that there's some veins, there's stuff like that. And to kind of get it a little bit more dramatic, I at least paint the shadow part of the vein. And yeah, it's kind of weird, like, I don't know, whatever. But it's the little details, you know, kind of who cares, you know. And then you'll zoom out and you'll be like, oh my God, that vein looks very veiny. That's kind of weird. I don't know if I ride with that. But, you know, neither here nor there. That's just the general idea. And then you'll do the same thing with the jersey. And, oh, that's a little bit strong. But yeah, I mean, it gets pretty time consuming the more you go into it, and you'll never truly get it all the way right. But that's the beauty of it. You can get the general idea of it pretty squared away, just, you know, within a few minutes. Just, you know, wherever the light doesn't hit, I mean, the light doesn't seem like it's hitting here. It's like hip flexor area. Like, you know, you want to pull out kind of where the muscles are. I mean, the more you kind of airbrush them in, the more they kind of look more prominent than they are. So I'll toggle on and off, and it just kind of looks like his biceps bigger, I guess. I don't know. Kind of weird. Tricep too. I don't know. And then you can do the same thing with his legs. I kind of make sure I follow the natural curves of the body. So try to paint in where I can to kind of, you know, bring out that effect. So, I mean, look at this knee, for example. We'll toggle it on and off. It's subtle, but it does actually help. And then, like, where this tibia or shin thing is, you paint it in there too. And next thing you know, it looks more detailed. And so just off that, just the lighting and shadows. And the lighting, you know, you can really get really dense with it. And so, for example, like kind of the last bit that I'll do is I'll put a clipping mask at the end here. I'll have a brush, maybe 27. I'll put the hardness at 57 or something like that. And then I'll get a white brush here. And then let me bump up the opacity. I do it at 100%. And I do it, and I only get the very, very edge of the player. Oh, I kind of messed it up down there. Good thing we got an eraser tool. But I basically will do that throughout the entirety of the player. I basically will make this white, very faint, very light silhouette that surrounds the player. And I end up finding that this little bit actually, maybe it's not the most realistic. I think there's sometimes where I do it in my graphics where it's not, like here, for example, like having a white brush on a black band. Normally when white light hits something that's black, it gets absorbed a lot of the time. So, you know, not to get too technical, but it doesn't look the most realistic. So I'll end up going through there and fixing it at the end. And then, you know, sometimes even when you have a shadow, you can oftentimes see like a silhouette of light at times too. That doesn't look great, but most times I'll go through and do that as well. But then here, that's hitting the light, like I said, very faint. And this is I'm trying to do this as quick as I can to kind of just illustrate for you my process. But normally, like when I do this for a graphic, it'll take a few hours just to get really, really in the weeds with it. And I just really enjoy doing it. So, it doesn't look the best there, but we'll toss that on the leg. Do it real quick. Yeah, so just off that alone, you can see toggling on and off. Doesn't make the world's biggest difference, but every little detail counts, and it all comes together like that, right? So then finally, the last thing I'll do is, obviously this part of the graphic is supposed to be the darker part. So right here, the light is all being treated the same, but for me, what I like to do is I like to make sure that you're focused, or your eyes are drawn to this upper part of the graphic. This is where the action happens. I don't really need to be seeing this dude's legs. Like, shout out Justin Jefferson, cool leg tat. I don't really care to see all that. So what I try to do is try to take a little bit of the attention off the legs. I do that by lowering the curves a little bit and making sure it's clipped on there. I'll lower the curve, right? And I will take this brush. I will make sure it's huge. I'll make it a soft brush, right? And then I'll just, while the whole thing is dark, you'll basically just try to delete some of the darkness on the top part of the jersey. So now when you toggle it on and off, like the legs of the player is not like so in your face. Like, I just genuinely like do not need to see his legs like all the way like that detailed. That's kind of weird. So I'll throw on the curves layer, and you can just tell that it does draw your focus more to this upper part of the body and this top part here, which is kind of the goal. You don't want to, when you're focusing on a player, you want, or when you're making a graphic, you want the focus to be on the player's face, their expression. If it's like a movement like this, where obviously like the cool part of it is the way he's catching the ball, you want the eyes to be drawn here, and you want to limit as much distraction as possible with stuff that doesn't really matter, like this. There will be graphics where, the shoes are really cool and you'll want to emphasize that more, but this isn't one of those cases. So that's kind of where we're at. But, this is kind of the idea behind, my player treatment and kind of my thought process when I'm creating something like this. It's, can be pretty tedious, and you can spend hours and hours and hours on this if you want. But, kind of the key to it, to summarize, is, you'll start with, let me toggle all these off and I'll show you this step-by-step recap. So you'll start with your original photo. You'll look on how much it's already, looks like it's in the environment, and then adjust accordingly. So for me, you'll throw on the camera raw, try to get the shadows up in this and try to bring the details out, try to make the purple color more rich, I guess, in this case. Then experiment with gradient maps a little bit to try to get the colors from the background onto the jersey and in the skin. We'll do a quick little lighting on overlay blend mode, 20%, fill on the brush, and we'll just try to brush in where we see the light hitting normally. So we'll toggle on and off. You can see that's where I think the light would be. And then the shadows, where, right here, the light wouldn't normally hit. Here, the light wouldn't normally hit. Kind of the bottom part of the legs where the light wouldn't normally hit. Toggle that on and off. And then we'll have a subtle outline where the light would directly hit, and then turning off the attention from the legs to focus more on the upper half of the jersey and the player. So you can see toggle on and off. That's kind of what it looks like. And I think generally, we have this color swatch here. I've had it here this whole time. I don't think it's identically a match, or I don't think it's an identical match, but it is closer than it was before. Whereas you compare here to here, this pink has made its way into the jersey right here, and this darker part is more more similar there. And here. So that's basically it. That's my player treatment, or the general gist of it. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it, but just for starters, I think this is the best way to get started. Camera Raw gets you 90% of the way there, and then the next 10% is with gradient maps and with this painting in the shadow and lighting. So I hope this helps. I hope this kind of answered your questions on what my player treatment actually looks like. If you have any more, feel free to reach out to me through my Instagram at jorges.psd. And then this PSD will be available on my website, jorgespsd.com. So you can download that there. It'll be completely for free. So let me know if you have any questions. But this is basically how I do my player treatment. So good luck. Hope this helps you with your own designs. And we'll see you in the next video.